Now let's take a look at the WASDE report. I mentioned that was another popular monthly one and tends to be very important both to grain and livestock producers, particularly grain producers, because it's very much watched in terms of both the grain and oilseed market, but livestock products are also reported in there as well too. Again, that web address is down there at the bottom, so if you want to take a look at those reports, go directly to that website. The WASDE report itself provides both domestic information within the United States as well as world information. I'm just going to focus on some of the domestic information here in terms of the balance sheets. Now, balance sheets are essentially all the supply added up plus all the demand added up, and the difference between those two are ending stocks. And USDA reports this for the grain and oilseeds markets that we often follow for about 3 marketing years. The current and the previous years are revised monthly, and so there's always an estimated year, a forecasted year, and then the year that was essentially. Here's the corn balance sheet from the January 2012 WASDE report, and you can see what I mean by the 3 marketing years. The first marketing year, or the first column that you're seeing here, is the 2009-2010 marketing year. The 2009-2010 marketing year for corn actually starts on September 1st and runs through August 31st. That's the corn marketing year. Same for soybeans, and wheat marketing year is July 1 through August 30th. But when you're looking at these marketing years, then the 2009-2010 numbers aren't being revised anymore, but the 2010-2011 marketing year that essentially ended August 31st, 2011, has ended, but those numbers are still being revised based on actual use numbers that are still being calculated. The last 2 columns that you see are 2 different projections for the 2011-2012 marketing year that ends on August 31st, 2012. USDA makes these estimates every month, and you see the December estimates there that were projected and the January projections as well. USDA did the same thing in February and March and April and so on until it starts forecasting its new marketing year, the 2012-13 marketing year, in May, in its May release. Now, just taking a look then at some of the numbers in these reports, you see here in the top part highlighted is mostly supply information, the number of acres planted and the number of acres harvested. Typically, we have what we call abandonment of about 9% or so in the United States. In other words, about 9% of corn that's planted isn't harvested for grain, either because it's cut for silage or abandoned due to drought or flooding or a variety of other problems. So planted acreage, along with forecasted yield information, gives us information about how many bushels are being produced. Essentially multiplying the 2 gives us our production number, and that's the number you see down there, for example, in the farthest right column. About 12.358 billion bushels of corn was the forecast production for the 2011-2012 marketing year. Also on the supply side, we see the amount of corn being imported into the United States. Typically, that's a pretty small number, about 15 million bushels in the 2011-12 marketing year. We also see what's called beginning stocks. Beginning stocks are essentially the corn that was left over from the previous year's supply. Note here that it's about 1.1 billion bushels. A fairly small number, but it's been smaller than that before too, but it tends to be a little bit on the smaller side. Notice there, for example, then that that the ending stocks number that we'll get here to in a minute, but the ending stocks number from the 2010-11 marketing year is what constitutes the beginning stocks for the next marketing year. So that's the supply side of the demand balance sheet. Let's take a look at the demand side of this balance sheet, and you see, for example, the amount of bushels that are forecast to be used for feed use. That's about 4.6 billion bushels. You see the amount that's being used for industrial uses. Industrial uses include ethanol, which accounts for almost 5 billion bushels of corn. Just recently, in the last marketing year or so, we've seen the amount of ethanol used, corn used for ethanol, surpass the amount being used for feed, because our livestock numbers, both on the cattle, hog, and poultry side, have all been declining. So corn use has been declining there. The other major export, the other major demand source is exports, and that accounts for just over 1.6 billion bushels of corn in this 2011-12 marketing year. So adding up all the supply information here, you've got about 13.5 billion bushels of corn. Demand for corn projected at about 12.65 billion bushels. That leaves an ending stocks figure of about 846 million bushels of corn. That's the number I was kind of trying to get to here, because that is the supply number, so to speak, that we look at and try to forecast then where the prices end up going from there. And the reason we can do that is because we look at the stocks-to-use ratio and its relationship to price. When I talk about a stocks-to-use ratio, I'm essentially talking about that ending stocks number, that 846 million bushels, divided by total use. In this case, about 12.65 billion bushels. That gives you a stocks-to-use ratio of about 6.7%. Doing the same calculation in the previous marketing years, you can see that the stocks-to-use ratio has been falling over the last 2-3 years. The reason that's important is because it's a relative measure of supply and demand. It gives us an idea of how tight the marketing situation is relative to corn. The tighter that number is, or the smaller that number, the higher corn prices tend to be. In fact, if I go back and show you that going all the way back to 1973 on this graph, you can see that there's an inverse relationship between farm prices, which you're seeing on the red lines, and the stocks-to-use ratio. Typically, the higher that stocks-to-use ratio is, it means that there is more supply out there relative to the demand available, and consequently prices fall. In years like we've seen most recently, there tends to be very little extra supply out there relative to the demand for corn, and as a result, prices tend to get higher and higher. So that information helps us get a forecast on where corn prices are going to look to go. Again, very important to compare the actual numbers that are reported in these WASDE reports to pre-release expectations. Going back and looking, for example, at the January report, USDA reported actual yields coming in at about 147 bushels per acre. Now that's relatively low compared to the trendline yield forecast, but it was slightly higher than what the trade was expecting. The trade was expecting about 146. The actual USDA number came in at 147, so even though that's a low yield, which should have drove prices higher, that's actually kind of bearish to the market because it's already bid in a 146 yield. USDA said 147 in that report. So as a result, production tended to be up closer to about 12.3 billion bushels instead of about 12.2, so that was a little bit on the bearish side. Ending stocks ended up coming in well above expectations. So in other words, more supply out there than what the trade was expecting. Trade was looking for about 752 million bushels, actually came in at about 846, so higher than expected there. Overall, this report looks to be a little bit on the bearish side. Just a couple other notes here to wrap up on the WASDE report. The marketing year is the one that's projected going out 1 year in advance. Corn and soybean projections begin in May of the preceding year. So for example, the 2012-2013 marketing year projections for corn and soybeans will actually happen on May of 2012. And will continue on that cycle for 1 year until it becomes the estimated column in May of 2013. The marketing year, like I said, is estimated for 1 year, and then it becomes the year that was, so to speak, in that farthest left column in the report. A couple other key months to watch for in the report, in the WASDE report. August is the first month that you see survey-based estimates for yields for corn and soybeans. So basically from about May through July, USDA is forecasting yields based on trendline forecasts, which are basically a statistical estimation based on previous years, and they make some minor adjustments for what weather conditions are and growing conditions across the United States. But that's the first time we see actual objective yield-based surveys coming out of fields. January is also the final time that you see the yield estimated for the corn and soybean crop as well. So January of the following year, after we harvest our grain, that's the last time that USDA estimates production numbers. So the January report is very highly anticipated to look at what that final yield estimate is, again, a supply number. So there's a lot of information in all these government reports, and that's maybe just a quick snapshot of some of the important things at least to be watching for. Some more information on the USDA Cattle on Feed report is available on Extension Circular 850 from University of Nebraska and 851 on the USDA Quarterly Hogs and Pigs report. Those are reports that I wrote there, and I invite you to take a look at those as well. And of course, join igrow.org for up-to-date information on some of the WASDE reports, crop progress and condition reports, and cattle on feed reports as they're released.